Get inside the great outdoors whenever you want with GameWardenTV.com, the website that goes behind the scenes of Game Warden Wildlife Journal. Learn more about the stories, email your ideas or environmental concerns, check out upcoming shows, exclusive merchandise, and publications, or find our stations and times nationwide. GameWardenTV.com. Get into the great outdoors whenever you want.
Black bears, grizzly bears, polar bears, mama bears, papa bears, and of course, bear cubs. They're some of the most captivating creatures on the planet. And Game Warden Wildlife Journal has certainly done its share of bear stories. So from our family to your family, we're proud to present some of our favorite bear stories. Like his cousin, the grizzly, the polar bear's sometimes been a threat to humans, especially in the winter, when meat's less abundant and a meal wrapped in a parka may look pretty good. But it seems we humans always have the last word. Both feared and prized as a trophy or a rug, the polar bear has been hunted nearly to extinction. And even though they're now protected, the situation becomes more than a little tense each winter in Churchill, Manitoba, when these dangerous predators stroll right into town. And it's up to the game wardens to protect both man and bear.
They will stalk people. I've seen them stalk. I've seen them charge.
You won't see them until you're right upon them.
Predictable as heck. I'm scared of them.
People have been killed along the coastal area where they ran into a bear unexpectedly.
The bears migrate along the shoreline and trying to get back north again, and Churchill's situated right in their path. And this, of course, is Main Street of Churchill, Manitoba, the primary spot that we don't want any bears to show up. If we have bears walking in town, the chances of somebody getting mauled are very great. As you can see, there's people walking all over. There's businesses, housing. Because of the chances of polar bears being around, the kids are all bused to and from school.
Polar bears are one of the largest land carnivores in North America. They're extremely powerful. They're a fascinating predator.
They're very unique to survive in this harsh climate we have in the north. They're out there for 7 months hunting seals with 40 below weather and a wind chill living on the ice.
They're concentrated in this area because of the geography of the land.
This time of year, the majority of our time is spent on polar bear alert program. Our job is to keep them out of town and hopscotch them over town as well. Once they put a control zone just outside the dump area and we aggressively try to capture the bears within that zone, we have less problems in town. Once the bears come into the control zone, we'll capture the bears either by culvert trap or by snare or by free-ranging, tranquilizing them with a dart gun. In excess of 12,000 to 14,000 people that come up a year to watch the birds, whales, and polar bears.
The control program addresses all these aspects of public education and removing problem bears before they become a problem. People can still have ample opportunity to view bears safely, and the town people don't have to have bears breaking into their houses.
They're top of the food chain and they have no natural enemies. Churchill's situated right in their path and they'll walk right through, and once they get this close, then definitely going to walk through town eventually if we don't handle them. In 1980, they established the holding facility, which we call D20. We were able to put the bears somewhere instead of catching them and releasing them in a culvert trap, just to find them coming back to town again. He's in jail because he came into our control zone. It's a bear that we handled in the past. Each one's numbered so we can identify them. This is a 32 gauge capture gun, and it's basically the same gun that you'd use for rhinos, elephants, anything that you're demobilizing. That blows a warning. If you're out on the land and you hear that, that's a warning to get the heck out of there. When you get one of them big giants, you'd use something this big. Well, from here to that door, I would use red. That's the most powerful we have. So I'd insert red and it's going to shoot that dart a lot further. The biggest one I ever worked on was about 1,300. We place them in the holding facility. 30-day period comes up is when we get them out, and how we get them out is we fly them in a sling by helicopter, and we more or less hopscotch them over the community. Last year we handled 117 bears that went in and out of here. It was a really busy year. We're in the 90% or better range on the ones that we let go that don't return to town. Prior to the program, an average of about 35 bears were shot a year that wandered towards the town of Churchill. Since the program, it's drastically lower than that. It's in the 4 to 3 to 5 range on an average per year, and that's including counting natural deaths that are found. It really lessens the chance of the polar bear population becoming too low to sustain itself, and it lessens the chance of anybody getting hurt in the community. This bear named Hydro, it's considered a high-risk bear, and we handled it 3 different occasions in the dump, and close to town 1 occasion, and 2 occasions at the dogs. This bear is on the move now because it's cooler, and he's just doing his migration, which they've done for thousands and thousands of years. So he's outside our control zone, which he's not a big worry right now. There's no people that live around here. If we didn't do nothing with that bear in his movements, he'd eventually get to town.
Hey, he started heading this way, then he sort of circled. He's just dawdling along there.
He's giving us the look like he can charge me any second. Move your neck the other way, buddy.
Did you get him?
Yeah, right.
Oh, stumped him.
Right in the neck. Because it's outside of our management area, we don't remove the bears, but at least we know which bear this is. And now if this bear comes to town, we'll know that this isn't the greatest place for these bears to be. And that 44 caliber handgun I carry, after the 5th shot, I just use the 6th one for myself because I don't trust them on these bears anyway.
Yeah, he's got deer tags. Tags?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't see him.
He's about 900 pounds, I'd say.
Yeah.
While the officers work, the bear's companion circles them, just close enough that a sudden charge could be disastrous.
Oh, I don't know. That's awful 5-ish. 11137.
Well, this is a bear we flew out of here, I'd say, 2 years ago. I remember this bear. Can we get his leg out? So he's a little more comfy.
It's a good thing to do. Try that.
But we'll leave him alone now. The bears will always be here. The people may leave, but the bears will still be here.
Here are animals that deserve your respect. They've been timed at 35 miles per hour on land, up to 6 miles an hour in the water, and can stand 11 feet high on their hind legs and weigh as much as 1,000 pounds. But in many places, the polar bear needs all the help the game wardens can provide. Hunters love to tell stories about grizzlies, but legend has trouble matching the reality of this awesome creature. Smart, resourceful, and sometimes very ill-tempered, the grizzly can grow to 8 feet in length, weigh in at 500 to 800 pounds, and can run 30 miles per hour in rugged backcountry. It's an amazing beast you don't want very close to where you live. And so game wardens are often called to intervene to protect both bears and humans. Let's look at a new technique that's working to keep this delicate balance.
Bears are very intelligent, and I guess the simplest way to express what we're trying to do is we're trying to teach bears no.
The dogs, the Carillions, are one of the tools we use when we're teaching bears. We use them in combination with rubber bullets, beanbag rounds.
Here's the beanbag round, that's what I hit her with. But it doesn't penetrate, you know, and we only shoot at them in the rear end. And you can hit them real close range with it.
And we push the bears out of places that they shouldn't be. Feeding of bears not only kills bears, but it endangers people's lives. We always yell, we always yell at the bear, we always have the dogs bark, we always have all of the sounds and things that we want her to learn she needs to move away from.
Good.
On a release.
Good. Bark at that bear, Tessa. Good girl. Good.
About 15 years ago, we had no alternatives for bears once they became a problem. Ultimately, the bear was destroyed. I began working on ways to teach them, and Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks said they'd support this work so that we could have coexistence between humans and bears.
We have a female grizzly that we caught last fall up the North Fork of the Flathead. Yeah, she's up that way. This spring she came out, and the first 3 locations we got on her, she was near cabins, and we couldn't figure out why. We found there was a wildlife photographer that had been feeding bears up there. We knew of 8 different grizzly bears that he had been feeding to attract them in and get good photos of them.
He's left for 6 months, but he's left bear boards up so bears will step on them if they get near his home, and yet he lured them into his home. What this man has done to get pictures is basically taught the bears to look at cabins for food. And they're dead bears if we can't retrain them.
Check it out.
The next day, Tim and Carrie do manage to track a grizzly to a group of cabins.
There, right there. Hey, bear, go on. Go on. Go on.
Working with Tim Manley has been a blessing.
With the grizzly on the run, Tim and Carrie move to another group of cabins where they hope to finish the job.
Tim is innovative, committed, dedicated. I trust him. I know that I can walk into a situation and we're going to work well together and we're going to get it done.
Good girl. That's a good girl. Okay. Patience is a big virtue in this job. If you don't have patience, you shouldn't be working on wildlife, because you end up sitting for hours and hours and hours and waiting for something to happen. And so that's what we were doing. We just sat and waited for her. She came right down the road, and we just waited till she got in range of the rubber bullets, and when it happens, it usually happens really quickly. Hey, bear, go on! If people don't feel like we're responding to bear-human conflicts, they're going to take matters into their own hands, and we don't want that. We don't want people just going out and shooting bears.
We can't win if we don't have people living in bear country aware that if they feed a bear, it's a dead bear.
Bears get to the point of breaking into stuff to get food, like breaking into barns, breaking into cabins, breaking into sheds. People aren't tolerant of that. They don't feel safe.
One of them came and tore the tent up, and she sewed it back up. And now she's cooking chicken soup inside, and they're sitting there, and they hear this growl, and he's right with his nose pressed against the tent, sniffing the chicken soup.
And those bears typically end up being removed, either to a zoo or being destroyed.
She had a gun, and so she fired rounds off at the ground, thinking that would scare him away. Didn't budge. He stayed right there.
We teach the public what their responsibilities are, and they work with us to prevent bear problems.
We have people that are calling us to report bear problems now that 2 years ago never would have, because they thought we'd just come in and move or destroy the bear.
You guys were real good about telling us what to do, so we're
Oh, well,
really
thanks. We appreciate it. It helped.
We're really into that.
Thank you.
Good.
I hope she
Okay.
does well.
Well,
Okay.
thanks
Keep
for
us
all the
posted.
prevention that you're doing, because we can't win if you're not doing that, so it's great. Hey, Lou, begging bear. Begging bear. You are seeing the first efforts of a program that is going to change how problem bears are managed throughout the world.
The country still feels wild if you have grizzly bears out there. It's something that I enjoy doing, and I think it's important to do, and I think we're doing a good job at it, so that people can continue to know there's grizzly bears out there, but yet they're not coming in their back door.
We can all understand why many of us are moving or retiring to areas where we can have the wilderness experience and regular opportunities to view wildlife. But all of us need to know that bears are not to be attracted. Old-timers go to great lengths to keep bears at a safe distance. And with grizzlies, a safe distance is a long distance. The needs of people and the concern for our environment often collide at the point where the grizzly chooses to stand. It's a dilemma. Here's a great mammal, certainly worthy of protection, yet this is also a very dangerous and unpredictable predator. The grizzly, by nature, keeps his distance, but sometimes circumstances bring him too close to campers or livestock grazing on the range. That often means trouble and brings on the game warden to make some sense of the scene.
Some game wardens have a true love for bears. They'll usually do anything they can for these creatures, even at the risk of their own lives. Such a man was Kirk Enberg, a Wyoming game warden and a real pioneer in bear management.
It was the first year that anybody had done it when he did it. And you know, it's been 7 years since his death.
We're really gathered here today to dedicate this interpretive site in memory of Kirk Enberg.
Kirk was killed in a plane crash. A report came in from a hunter that he had had an encounter with a grizzly bear and shot the bear and thought he wounded it. Kirk thought it may be one of his radio-collared bears, got in a plane to search for the animal.
The plane took off that morning and crashed in the rugged Wyoming country Kirk loved so much.
He realized the danger involved in the bear program.
You know, he wanted to be a game warden, but he also just had a passion for bears.
He just had a ton of friends, and it really makes me happy that they still remember Kirk.
It was working with Kirk that sparked my interest really in doing this sort of work.
The legacy of Kirk Enberg continues through a handful of dedicated game wardens like Mark Brusino, who try to deal with each crisis where bear meets the world of man.
Last night there was 5 sheep killed, 3 ewes and 2 lambs, and he fully consumed 1 lamb and probably did feed on some of this meat here. This is the first lamb that we found this morning. It's fully consumed. They have kind of a skinned out appearance. Leg bones have been sheared off.
By law, the state must reimburse ranchers for livestock taken by the grizzlies. And in general, relationships between ranchers and the government get tense when stock is lost to bears.
The options are limited for the livestock producer. They cannot kill a bear in defense of their property, which includes their livestock. What we have done is to try and target individual bears that are preying on livestock, let the bears that aren't preying on livestock remain in and around the areas where livestock are produced, and target the individual bear that's preying on the livestock and move him to an area that's free, so that people and bears can coexist. Yellowstone National Park is prepared to take this animal if we catch it, and they usually relocate it with our assistance to the very north end of the park. Bear walks in, we make a nice place for him to step. He steps there. The spring fires and throws a cable up around his wrist and tightens it. And then he's tethered to the tree till we get here in the morning.
The next day, the game wardens check the snare trap they've set to capture the bear. But it appears the grizzly wants no part of it.
It's kind of them trying to fool me and me trying to fool them. We're going to continue to try and capture the grizzly. It was in the sheep again the last couple of nights.
Somewhere out there is a bear whose only defense is that he's acting like a bear. But Mark and the other officers are determined to find him before he takes many more sheep.
I'd be just as happy as could be if he'd just leave and never be seen again.
Meanwhile, 100 miles away, Mark's partner Chris Queen is working the Yellowstone Park area, where visitors all too often come in close contact with bears. Part of the bear management program is educating the tourists on the dangers of getting too close to grizzlies. At this scene, Chris stops a woman from crossing the creek to get a better photo, and a boy from throwing rocks at the bear.
Right now we're at a pretty comfortable distance, and anything that we can do not to aggravate it is all the better.
People also have to be encouraged to cut off the food supply they inadvertently provide the bears. Easily obtained food, like open garbage containers and coolers left on porches, lure grizzlies ever closer to human habitation.
This design has been bear-proof. Sweet.
But the bears need to be controlled too. Routinely, Chris and the other game wardens trap bears, tranquilize them, and fit them with radio collars so their routes can be tracked. Then, according to procedure, the game wardens take biological measurements, blood and tissue samples, and a tooth to determine her age. If these collared bears seem to encroach too much on roadways or campgrounds, they're captured again and transported to less populated areas. No, this is more than a campground pest. It's a truly dangerous carnivore.
There is a possibility that a bear will just come out of the trap, turn, and make a run at you. It's looking at you, and it has its ears laid back. Get ready.
Bear management's not for people who seek easy, clear-cut solutions. Mark and Chris's #1 concern is the safety of the public. But they're also determined to protect the grizzly's tenuous hold in the Wyoming ecosystem.
They're probably the last little bit of wildness that we have.
I think Kirk would think quite a bit of the bear program now, because I think Mark's doing a real good job in there. And Kirk would think that a lot of his thoughts and some of the programs that he started were being carried on.
We'll walk on glass for bears.
Left alone, grizzlies will usually stay far away from humans. But as people continue to encroach on bear country, confrontations do take place, and sadly, the grizzly is usually the loser. As our game wardens keep telling us, the best thing to do with a grizzly, for everyone's best interest, is to leave him alone. How can a bear sleep all winter and wake up fit and limber when our astronauts suffer from muscle atrophy in just a few days in a space capsule? Some people are willing to crawl right down into bear dens to find the answers to a lot of questions, including ways to better protect bears. For the scientists and conservation officers of the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, taking bears out of their winter dens is just part of a year-round program of tracking, studying, and managing these fascinating creatures.
They're never easy, but that one was a bit upside down and left-handed. I'm too big for the hole.
He wasn't even scared. I was scared. Because I was sliding down, all I could do was cringe.
The thought of sticking my head in a bear den was not the first thing I wanted to do. Some bears are not agitated, and you can crawl right in there, and they'll just look at you like a big puppy dog. Other bears will try and rip your face off.
This was designed as a 10-year study to look at the effects of hunting population in the boreal forest, northern Ontario. The ultimate goal is that I will be making recommendations about what sustainable harvest levels would be. We try to get as many animals as we can out of the den so that we get weights and accurate body measurements. To understanding how the output of the population varies from one year to the next.
When we arrive in spring, we use the electronic equipment to track the collar. All the humps of snow tend to look alike, so experience is an asset.
The evening before, we get the crew leaders together and decide how we'll allocate people to what crews we have so many snow machines.
2 teams set out to locate the bears in their winter dens.
We've got to move all of the snow out of the den entrance. It's very, very steep. If we leave the snow in, gravity's just going to pull me right into the den when I go in to do the drugging. I've just drugged the female, and we'll give her about 5 to 10 minutes to go out enough that we can handle her. The cub's really squealing now. It's a good indication that the female's falling asleep, and she's kind of squishing him with her arm, and they're yelling at her to get off. But it takes quite some time in the winter for the drug to get through their system. Their metabolism is so slow. In the summer, it takes 3 or 4 minutes, and they're completely zombed. She's fast asleep. We'll probably go in next, take the cubs out so we don't squish them with the female. You're too big? Okay.
We need to send in our smaller crew people.
This was about as standard an excavated den job as we could expect. We got lucky and managed to put her down with a single dose. The cubs were easy to handle. Is there 3 loose or just 2? I'm not sure. No cubs. The female will react to the sound of the cubs even though she's sort of unconscious, so we want to keep them quiet. 3 cubs in the litter is not that unusual. 3. It's pretty rare in this country to have 4 cubs. 3 males. You're going to have to pull my legs. I'm going to be like the rope. I'll have hold of her, and you guys will have to pull me. One of the first things we want to do is get a weight on her. Well, we've done the measuring. We've checked her fur, done a few measurements. We're going to get a temperature on her here in a sec, and then we're all done. This is often the hardest part of the job, is getting them to go back down a hole. It's like trying to push a rope. It'll be snugger than it was when we started.
Meanwhile, the second team has located its designated den.
The den is in this big root mass, 20 meters ahead of us here. It looks like that a female builds pretty much the same kind of den from year to year, and often they end up building the same kind of den that their mother built.
Once we've located the den, we look for signs of the entrance, and we try and look at it from the bear's point of view. Which way would I go in here if I was the bear?
It's minus 34 degrees Celsius today. A lot of the work has to be done in bare hands or these narrow tunnels. You've got to take your coats off. It's really cold on the humans.
Having the information to set proper limits on harvests, we'll know that we'll continue to have a good productive bear population into the future. So everybody will benefit, whether they just like to watch bears or whether they actually hunt bears. You can just tell that their intelligence just in the way some of them have built their dens, because some of them build really intricate dens that it's very hard to get into. And just watching them interact with their cubs, it's pretty fascinating. Anybody, the first time they have a little cub in their hands, that's pretty much says it all when you see they're all smiles and all that. Even the most seasoned, grizzled conservation officer suddenly turns to a little bit of putty.
What I'm going to do now is just crawl on top of her, lift her head up, put a couple of branches underneath, protect her from the stuff, and then we'll try and close up.
We close the den up using brush and evergreen boughs and snow, and generally when we leave, the den is in much better shape as far as an insulated area to live than it was when we arrived.
We've got a lot of good information. There'll be a lot of really good stuff come out of this study.
Now it's data crunching time.
You're contributing to the science of this animal. It's a big game animal that we're trying to manage, and you just feel good. And that's why I do it.
You've got to do it for the bears. And what drives you is you're just driven to ensure that the bear population is conserved and sustained.
Bears present a special problem to those who wish to protect them. They're fascinating, lovable in some ways, and yet they're frequently in some kind of trouble. To find out more about bears, visit our website, which is always growing with new bear stories. The spring of 1996 was a time of severe drought in the West, turning many of the forests into tinderboxes. One of the largest fires occurred in central Arizona, where 60,000 acres were consumed. The impact was catastrophic for the mammals, reptiles, and bird life that inhabited this rugged mountain area. Now, after the forest has had some time to repair itself, the wildlife is also on the road to recovery. But will things ever be the same there? Arizona game and fish biologist Stan Cunningham intends to find out.
The tops of these mountains behind me go up to 7,000 feet, which is excellent bear habitat. All the tops of these mountains burned. We essentially lost our pine forest to the fire, and we're very concerned on what's happened with the bear population. We have these mountaintops surrounded by desert, which are forest, and so essentially they're just like an island in the ocean, and our animals can't leave it.
Up in these sky islands, the game and fish biologists cover a lot of ground, looking for animal trails and signs to better survey the bear population. They also capture bears to establish their health and vigor, as well as to attach radio collars so they can be tracked to specific areas. And to catch a bear, you build a trap called a cubby.
It's called a cubby. I don't know where that name came from, but the outside is just dead sticks and logs. You try and get two pretty large logs and then you build it kind of off of it. The training for this, you have to be a kid. You have to be a kid that's built forts, because that's about what this is. Now I need to make sure that the bear really doesn't have any place else to step except right where I want it. Before we build the cubby, we usually put the cable. You can see part of it laying there. And there's also a throw arm that has been pounded into the ground. When the bear comes in here, you can see I've tried to direct his feet so that pretty much he or she has to step right here, as I've got this throw arm set so that the bear should step in it with its right hand, because I don't want this throw arm coming up and hitting this animal in the chin. So that's what will happen. This cable will have been wrapped around that, and that at that time will tighten around the animal's leg.
After baiting the cubby with rotted fish, the biologists leave the area, hoping a bear will be attracted to the trap when night falls.
Well, these are our bear markings right here along the tree. Those are actually the teeth, and they'll get up and they'll bite it. We think they do it to kind of mark the territory and show, you know, hey, I'm this tall, you better get the heck out of here. This is my country. This is a tall bear. He's about 7 foot when he stands up, and that's a big black bear. You get your first 350-pound bear, and it's like, oh my God. It's just, it's overwhelming.
The next morning, the team finds a bear has taken the bait and been snared.
He's gorgeous.
We can see by the radio collar that this bear has been caught before, but it's still none too happy and has turned the cubby trap into matchsticks.
He's a good sized animal. He's got huge feet, big broad head. Okay, safety's on. Ro, I'm gonna have you come down with me. I'll have you carry the pepper spray in your gun. I can probably get a good direct shot. I don't think he can get on the other side of that tree from me.
To permit examination, the bear will be tranquilized with a dart gun that will put him to sleep for a little while. It's perfectly safe for the bear, and it's sure a lot safer for the bear biologists.
Okay, bud, stay silent. Yeah, it's gonna be really easy, real painless. Let's go.
A new radio collar will be attached and all the data recorded and updated so the bear can be tracked in the future.
He's pretty. He's a pretty bear. He's big enough, he basically goes wherever he wants to. 7 1/4. That's a really big pet.
Look at his foot.
Yeah, his shit's huge.
The biologists take blood samples, then several measurements, which will allow a pretty accurate estimate of his weight, size, and condition.
He's been fighting a little bit lately. He is minimum of 11. Bears really got under my skin. I don't know why. I always thought they were cool animals. The first few I handled, and the first time I really realized their strength and how massive and how strong they are and how smart they are. Something clicked in me, and I could study bears forever. I think they're neat.
Cuddly, ferocious mischief makers and always awe-inspiring, bears are very much a part of our treasured wildlife. We hope you enjoyed our favorite bear stories. Until next time, I'm Josh Bryant. Take care of yourself, and take care of our great outdoors.
How many of you realize there was a time before we came when the forest lay unbroken from the ocean to the plains? Now there's some of us who recognize that man has changed the land, and there's trouble in the making that we need to understand. And so come to do our best, we've come to lend a helping hand.